Hello everybody and welcome to this presentation about Mencius. In the past section we could learn how for Mencius there is a spontaneous feeling of empathy in each one of us when we observe a child who is going to fall in a well. In this presentation we are going to describe how Mencius builds on the feeling his philosophy of justice and goodness. In the Analect, the two main values for Confucius were goodness, Jeune, and rituals. And these two values were embodied in different human relationships. With the Mencius, the idea of justice becomes much more important to organize human relationship. In the Analect, Confucius had already mentioned justice, especially when he described what a gentleman, a junzi, should do. A first example for Analect 4:16, Confucius explained that the gentleman understands justice when the petty person understands only profit. Another example is when Confucius explains that the gentleman should not think about profit but about justice. This conflict between justice and profit is expressed in a much clearer way at the beginning of the Mencius. Several kings come to visit Mencius and ask him advice on how to govern. In his answer, Mencius insists that they have to get the idea of immediate profit out of their mind. For Mencius, government starts by oneself. If I treat my people, or if I treat my family, people of my village, according goodness, then I can apply this feeling to everyone. That's the idea of extension of Jeune. Here we have a main difference between Confucius and Mencius. Confucius was more concerned with learning and the context of each of his students. Mencius is more interested in offering explanations of the Confucian philosophy. The base of everything for Mencius is that human nature has naturally a tendency towards goodness. In other words, all human beings have the capacity to feel goodness. He uses many metaphors to express this idea. This ability to the feeling of goodness is a difference between human beings and other creatures. But this ability is not given forever. We have to work on it. In his dialogue with the king of Liang, there are three assumptions. All human beings can perceive similar things. It's true for goodness, but it's also true for other things. All men tend to reach the same mental perception as a proof, to assert that human feelings tend to have the same inclination. For example, we all like to have good food, to listen nice music. And it's the same with a feeling of goodness. It's a universal feeling. And here, Mencius uses the example of a child falling into a well. But according to Mencius, this kind of universal feeling are going to lead us into action. And because we share the same ability to perceive feelings, Mencius is able to know what's going on in the heart of the king Xuan of Qi. Mencius is able to recognize a spot of empathy. All the work of Mencius in his dialogue with the king is to make him realize that there is a connection between the situation and his actions. In the case of a child falling into a well, as an observer, we are not able to act, but still we have the desire to act. In the case of the ox, the responsible for the harm is the same as the observer, who feels empathy. But using this image, Mencius is trying to make the king understand that there is a connection between his feelings and his actions. There are consequences to our desires. Mencius is going to develop that about how the king governs his people. The king is always trying to fulfill his personal desires for wealth or for other things. But there is also another kind of desire in the king's heart, the desire to act as a true king. Mencius, by making the king understand that his desires have a direct impact on his actions and therefore on his people, is trying to make him reform himself. According to Mencius, once we have identified our real, genuine desire, it's much easier to detect accidental and voluntary errors. The problem often comes from the fact that we do not see or do not want to see the consequences of our private desires. In a nutshell, for Mencius, there is a sprout, a capacity to acknowledge other people's suffering that can lead us not only to sympathy but also to action. Goodness and justice are not only one side a feeling and on the other side an action, they are both feeling and action. We can rely on them for our private and public life. In the end, for Mencius, we need to choose which kind of desire we want to develop in ourselves. And more generally speaking, this is true for our human nature. If a king gives a good condition to his people, then his people will naturally grow in goodness. Thank you for watching. Have a good day.